Nothing has changed about Donald Trump's position, and his principles have been absolutely consistent. We're going to secure the border. We're going to build a wall, have a physical barrier. We're going to enforce the laws of this country, end sanctuary cities.
Well, that is the VP nominee for the Republican Party, Mike Pence, defending Donald Trump after he has been slammed for changing his tone on immigration. Trump set to make a major address on this issue on Wednesday. So what can he say to win over voters? Well, here to weigh in, political reporter, Washington Free Beacon reporter, Gabby Morrongiello. She's, by the way, in Washington. She's joining us in just a second. But here next to me is the author of Crossing the Thinnest Line, Chivee. Lauren, let's start out with you now. And your book is coming out in 3 weeks, so congratulations on that. So I want to ask you about this, because Donald Trump has been softening his tone on immigration. That's a word that he's used. That's a word that Kellyanne Conway has used as well. How is that playing over with voters so far?
Well, I think at this point, he's got a virtually impossible needle to thread. I mean, he's been very clear about his position, and you just heard Governor Pence say that his position has not changed. And his position is fundamentally at odds with the majority of Americans. 65% of Americans actually support a path to legal citizenship for illegal immigrants who are in the country. It's actually a tiny minority of Americans. Even among Republicans, 50% of Republicans support some path to citizenship for immigrants.
But among his base, and we now have Gabby available down in Washington. Gabby, this change in tone has to be concerning to a lot of people who are supporting him so far.
It absolutely does, and we've seen a lot of outrage from some of his top supporters. I know Ann Coulter wasn't happy to see him shift his tone on immigration, and I know there are a lot of outstanding questions about where he intends to go with this. The biggest being whether this is a shift in his approach or a shift in his policy. Kellyanne Conway was on the airwaves yesterday talking about mass deportation and whether or not Donald Trump still intends to deport some 11 million immigrants who are still in the U.S. illegally, and there are a lot of questions about whether or not he does still intend to do that. We know he wants to build a wall along the southern border. We know he wants to look at visas, but whether or not he plans to take a more humane approach to deportation is something that we should expect him to address in the coming days.
Yeah, but he can't afford to alienate his base so far, and that's why a lot of people who supported him had supported him so far. And if he's not going to actually do that, deport 11 million illegals, I think a lot of those voters might be upset and could even stay home. Take a look, though, at this Washington Post ABC News poll. And the question that was posed was, who do you trust more to handle immigration? And the answer may surprise some Trump supporters. 57% better trust Clinton to handle it, 36% Donald Trump. Lauren?
Well, look, I think part of that is a reflection of the fact that it's so completely outside of anything rational, reasonable, or even practical to deport 11 million people many of whom have been living in the country for years. And so I think when it comes to this question of a path to legal citizenship, that is the view of a majority of Americans. By the way, George W. Bush won 40% of Hispanic votes when he ran in both 2000 and 2004.
And the Bush administration wouldn't call it amnesty, but it was effectively amnesty, and that upset a lot of his core constituency.
It did, but it won in the election. So in the end, the question is the core constituency who supports deporting 11 million people actually going to win you the White House? And I think the answer is no. And I think Trump is starting to realize that. If you look at the basic numbers, you really have no choice. And this is the problem. If candidates continue to alienate minority voters the way he has, the White House will remain Democrat for years.
We'll get to that issue in just a second. Gabby, I want to ask you quickly before we move on to our second topic, what does he need to say in his speech that he's planning to give on this on Wednesday?
Well, again, he needs to address the question of whether or not this is a change in policy. Is he going to change where he stands on mass deportation? Is he going to change where he stands on building a wall along the southern border and tightening up our border to make it less porous? Is he going to change the way that, President Obama has enacted programs like DAPA and DACA? These are things that he hasn't really gotten into the nitty-gritty details about before, and I expect him to address in that immigration speech.
Okay, let me ask you both about something else. Despite mounting pressure and criticism, Hillary Clinton is still refusing to hold a press conference. So the question is she simply trying to run out the clock and avoid the media on this? Gabby?
I absolutely think she is. I mean, if you listen to what her campaign manager, Robbie Mook, has been saying, when asked whether or not they intend to hold a press conference between now and Election Day, he says, you know, we'll get around to that. We'll take a look at it. That, to me, is a flat no. And Hillary Clinton, earlier this week, there was a poll released that showed that 69% of independent voters do not see her as an honest or trustworthy candidate.
All right, Lauren,
So,
just a few seconds left, ladies.
I mean, I don't think she has a lot. She has more to risk than to gain by doing the press conferences. I happen to be someone who would like to see her do it, but I also can understand why there's really no upside. She's doing very well in the polls. She's communicating her message the way she wants to. Why take the risk? If I'm her campaign manager, I take the same tack.
We all want to hear from her, voters, reporters,
well,
too.
People are hearing from her, just maybe not the way they want to.
Yeah, okay. Well, Lauren Chivee, thank you so much. And Gabby Morrongiello, thank you so much for joining us as well.